So I served from March 2013 to September 2014. And I was called to the Argentina Bahia Blanca Mission. Couldn't say that when I read my call, but now I can. And then I served, in Argentina, I served in 5 areas. I started off in Olavarria, and then I went to Santa Rosa, Tandil, Mar del Plata, and then I finished off my mission in Carmen de Patagones. And so what's funny is it's a huge mission. It covers parts of 3 different provinces, like the states. And so I served in all of the corners of all the different provinces. So I jumped around a lot, but it was a lot of fun. My mission itself, the northeast part of my mission is the bottom part of the Buenos Aires province. So we don't have the city of Buenos Aires, but like just the south part of that state. And then we have all of the province of La Pampa. And then we have one city in Rio de Negro. And so we covered 3 different states, and so our mission was huge. And we always had to cross these weird state borders and everything. But it was a lot of fun because it was kind of hard being moved around to so many different areas because I was constantly on a bus for like 8 hours. And you're not always with people you know. I mean, they try to put you on buses with other missionaries. That doesn't always happen. And so being this little gringo girl riding a bus by myself was so nerve-wracking, and I didn't know where I was going, or I didn't know where to get off the bus, and it was so scary. But it's just really fun because, because you have the Spirit constantly, you are blessed in ways you don't even realize. I think I woke up at the right times, and I was able to ask someone if we'd already passed my stop, and they're like, no, you still have 2 more stops. And one thing I loved about the bus rides was that because they were so long, I was able to talk to people that was around me and even share my message with them, even though I was probably never going to see them again. I could explain a little bit about myself, why I looked different and why I was wearing a dress and had a name tag and everything, and share the gospel with them. And those were probably some of the most fun times I had because there was no pressure, because sometimes you get nervous talking to people because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to come see them again, and what if they don't accept the gospel and da-da-da. But I loved those because I was like, I can give them the contact information for the church, and it's up to them if they want to hear it. But I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and sharing my testimony with them, And so I got to meet the most interesting people on the bus. And one huge thing about Argentina is they drink mate down there. And most Americans think it is the grossest thing ever. And I did too when I first got there, but now I love it. And so I remember one time I was riding the bus, and we were probably a good 4 or 5 hours into the bus ride, and I turn around, and this guy gets under his seat and pulls out this mate cup and just starts making a mate drink. And I was like, where did he get that from? And it was just so random how they will drink mate at any point they possibly can, with any break. If they're at work, I swear I saw someone drinking at a church one time, anywhere they will drink mate because they love it so much. And so we weren't allowed to drink it, but it was a good opportunity for us to kind of explain why we can't drink it and explain a little bit about the rules and everything of the mission. But it's just crazy how easy it is to find points to talk about with people. We would just find things about their culture or their families or just what's important to them and find a way to connect that to the gospel and then just start teaching about it. And I found out that that's one of the best ways to teach the people down there, because you're connecting to them and their culture, and they really appreciate that you're trying to accept them and, try to become part of their culture while you're living in their country. And they had a lot of respect for us because of that. A little bit about history of Argentina is the country itself, majority of the people were actually refugees from other countries. Honestly, the most famous or common one, I guess, would be in Germany when all the Nazis and all the crazy stuff was happening during the war. A lot of refugees took boats down to Argentina and they just landed and settled different towns and cities down there. So actually in Argentina, there's not a lot of darker skinned people. The majority of them are actually white, and so I didn't feel super out of place. I mean, a little bit because I had, blonde hair and blue eyes and everything. But it was really interesting because people didn't always assume I was from America. I got, people would always guess where I was from, and they thought I was German most of the time, and they would guess all these random countries. But what I thought was interesting was that they didn't have the typical Latino background culture, like you think about in Mexico or Peru or something like that. They don't have those type of backgrounds. And so you'll actually meet a lot of people that still know German because of their families and everything. And because of that, we didn't eat typical Latino food. We ate a lot of pasta and potatoes because it's more of a European thing. And so the culture itself is European based, especially how the houses and cities are set up. They're not set up with like each individual house. It's more of a European style where everything's just like stuck to each other and they just build an entire block, next to each other. And so one thing that was fun was trying to learn how to know when someone was knocking at your door and not knocking next door, because everyone has fences outside their house, and so you couldn't actually knock on their doors. You would have to clap outside of their fences. And so you learned how to figure out if they were clapping at your fence or at somebody else's. And it was really fun because if my companions and I were ever bored in the street, we'd practice our clapping and try different ways to clap. And it was just like one of the things that we did in the streets, because it's not like we had a car and we could play games in the car. But yeah, that's one thing I really liked about Argentina, was learning about their history and their culture, and how it's not the typical Latino culture, but rather everything from Europe, and learning more about European history than South American history, I guess. It was really fun. There were a ton of challenges down there because the country itself is pretty much a Catholic country. And the hard thing is that majority of people are Catholic, but they don't actually go to church. They don't, participate in any of the religious ceremonies or anything. Like on a good year, they'll go for Christmas or something, but they don't actually practice their religion. They just say that they're Roman Catholic and they don't want to hear anything else from a different church. And so that was a huge challenge, was trying to explain to people why they need to actually practice what they believe, and, to help them find the true church, because they were so stuck on tradition. And it was really hard because we even met a lot of people that listened to our discussions. They gained testimonies of the church, but refused to be baptized because they were Catholic. And because of their family traditions, they couldn't be baptized into another church. So that was super hard for me to watch these people gain a testimony of Jesus Christ and of the gospel, and then not be able to enter the waters of baptism. So that was super, super hard for me. And then another challenge, which kind of is the same thing, another big church that's down there is the Evangelist Church. And that was super hard because I can remember at least like 5 or 6 times where an evangelist missionary would try to like smack me with the Spirit. I don't know if you've heard of them doing that, but it is very awkward because I don't believe in that spirit. And so it's super hard to explain to them, oh, I already have the gift of the Holy Ghost, thank you so much anyways. Like, it was really hard to get to know those people because they're so stuck on their church. And one thing I did respect about that church is they do believe they practice what they believe, and they go out and they have missionaries, and it's really similar to our gospel. So I really respected them in that aspect, but at the same time, it was really hard because they were so similar to our church. It was really hard to teach the evangelist people the differences between the church and why our church was the true church of Jesus Christ, and, how to feel the Spirit in a different way. Because they tend to feel the Spirit very strongly with very loud music and bands and everything, and that gets your adrenaline going, and so it's sometimes hard to tell them about the reverence that we find in our church and everything. So that was definitely a challenge for me, was trying to find a way to teach these people so that they can know how to feel the true Spirit of, Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father, and how to find the true church and how to pray to know if it's true and everything. And then another huge, huge challenge that is found in Argentina is the concept of marriage, because nobody gets married because it is way too expensive and nobody can afford it. And so they'll just live together. And then because of that, it's also really expensive to get divorced. So even if we taught somebody and they gained a testimony of the church and they wanted to be baptized, and so they had to get married to be baptized, the chances are they're both already married to somebody else, but they never got a divorce, and so now they're living together, and they probably already have children together. And so it's so hard because they won't get divorced because they can't afford it, or, the marriage was in a different state, and so it's basically impossible if you already live in a different state. And so that was also really hard, was first of all trying to convince them the importance of marriage and why, it's important in the church and everything. But then once they realize how important it is, actually getting them to get married and getting all the paperwork and finding their documents and trying to find a way to get married, it was such a struggle. But it's always amazing to see the chosen ones that actually will go through the steps and do everything they possibly can to get married. And actually, while I was there, I was teaching this family. We ran into some less actives, and we were trying to reactivate them. And it was just at a point in their lives where they really needed the church, and so they just clung to the gospel, and they were so excited to have it in their lives again. And the mom had, I don't think her and her previous partner had ever been married, but they had a couple kids together. And then now she was living with another guy who had been married previously, but he never got divorced. And so it was super hard because they weren't living the commandments, but we were teaching them, and they were like, okay, we'll live it, we'll get married, we're going to do everything we can so that her spouse, but they're not married, could get baptized and so they could be sealed in the temple. And so it was really hard because it was such a struggle for their family to try to get him divorced, and it took months. And while I was there, they never were able to get him divorced, but I've stayed in contact with them, and so they were able to tell me that he did get divorced, and so they were planning their marriage, and they're planning their trip to the temple in a year to get sealed as a family. And so it's just so amazing to see that even though it's such a struggle, that the people that really have a testimony of Jesus Christ, they will do anything they possibly can to be able to receive the covenants that they need, and so that they can be part of the family of Jesus Christ and be sealed as a family. And it's so amazing to see their testimonies grow and just how important that is for them. I mean, if you don't have appointments and if members aren't giving you referrals, the only thing that really is left to do is knock doors, which is probably the least effective way to find people to teach, but it was kind of the resort we were left with most of the time. But when we were able to have members help us, we found the most success in that, obviously, but it wasn't always available to us because in some of my areas, the members weren't as excited to help the missionaries. But it was fun to see in the areas that did have a really good word missionary program, how excited the members were to be a part of it and come tracting with us and everything. They just got so excited about it. And the baptisms in that area were way higher than in other areas that the members weren't really participating in the work with. I think another kind of less challenging problem that I found down there was the weather, because there were it totally depends on the time of year, but there were some crazy monsoons I went through, and you can't just sit indoors and do nothing while there's rain outside, and so we had to keep working. And so we were walking through this courtyard one time, and branches off of trees were falling because it was so windy and so rainy, and I swear there was lightning. And we were just walking through the streets trying to clap at doors, and people would open their window and be like, "You're crazy, go home." And they would just close the doors. And we were like, wait, we thought you were supposed to invite us into your house to get us off of the rainy streets, but it kind of had a backfire effect. And so that was definitely a struggle, was trying to just keep working through the crazy weather, or if it's 120 degrees and you're wearing these black clothes and everything, just trying to find the strength to move forward and just keep knocking on doors. The weather can be super crazy, and not I seriously were some days I just didn't want to leave the apartment and I didn't want to go work because I was so tired, and I was just it's raining outside or it's super hot, and it was just so hard. But one thing I realized after the fact was that even though I thought those things, after I got past those crazy weather times, I guess, I realized that I didn't fully realize what was happening and how big of a challenge it was, because I got through it. I kept pushing forward, and I got to the point where I just didn't even realize or care if it was super hot and super humid. I just kept working because I knew I had a job to do. And because of that, I swear the Spirit helped regulate my body, and so I wasn't feeling the full effects of the weather or something, because I seriously didn't even feel the effects of it later, and I didn't even care. And even though I was walking through a monsoon, I just had a smile on my face, and I was so excited to go meet people and try to teach them about Jesus Christ, So it's interesting that the Spirit can help you with anything, and it was so amazing to feel the Spirit so much in my mission. Okay, so this wasn't me, but with my companion, yes, we had a crazy animal story. So we went out on Refuerzos. I don't even know how to say that in English. It's where a bunch of missionaries from the entire zone come together and we all just go out through one area and just contact like crazy. And so the missionaries in that area get a ton of potential investigators, and so the work just like flourishes for that time, you know? So it was our turn to do it in our area. And so we all split up and we were all going out. And then my companion and I were knocking on a door, and while we were talking to this girl, she was like a young teenage girl, their dog comes out and pees on my companion's leg. And she was like, that's awesome. And so the girl wasn't even gonna like help us out to clean it or anything. And so eventually we convinced her to like get us a towel so we could try to wipe off, you know, everything that was happening. She wasn't interested, we moved on. And then probably like a half an hour later, we were knocking on this guy's door and we were talking to him, and he seemed really interested. He seemed like an awesome guy, and we were talking to him. And as we were leaving, after we talked to him, his dog comes out and bites my companion. And we were freaking out. We're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Because I'm sure he could like smell the pee and everything. And so we were freaking out. We called the elders and we're like, what do we do? Like, a dog just bit her. And the rule is if you get bit by a dog, you have to go to the hospital and get a rabies shot and everything. But it hadn't actually broken the skin. But we had to meet up with the elders to make sure she didn't have to go to the hospital or anything. And so she was like limping because she just got bit by this huge dog. But so we didn't have to go to the hospital, so we just kept working. She's like, no, I am doing this. I'm not going home. And I was like, you need to go home and rest. And she was just so determined. It was her first transfer. She was a little greenie. And she was so amazing and so enthusiastic about the work. She was like, I don't care. I am going to ignore my bite, and we're just going to keep doing this because the missionaries all came over to help our area, you know? So I'm like, all right, I'm leaving it up to you. And so we kept going, and then probably 10 minutes later, another dog peed on her, and she was like, okay, I give up. This is just not a good day for me. She's like, I'm going back. And so we like met up with the missionaries and just went back to our chapel, and she was just like, this was a very interesting day for me. So it was just so funny, and we still joke about that, how she had a crazy dog day. It was just the entire day dogs were just attacking her, and it was so funny. The biggest piece of advice I would have to say is read your scriptures every day. I don't have an awesome scripture study every day. Most of the time I'm just reading a couple of verses, but that is what's going to keep you going. After you think when you're on the mission you're going to go home and life's going to be great because you can do whatever you want and you get to make your own decisions, make your own schedule. It's not as glamorous as it sounds, but you know, you have to do it. And so reading the scriptures is what's kept me going through the years, you know, of being home. And even when life is so hard, the scriptures is what strengthens me. So that's probably the biggest thing I would say. I know a lot of return missionaries that have become inactive, and it always starts with them stopping to read the Book of Mormon. You know, I was about to say that in Spanish. They just don't read the book as much anymore, and so that's the biggest thing. Even if you can do an amazing study every day, read the Book of Mormon every day, and that's what's going to keep your testimony strong and keep you going in the gospel. And then for missionaries that learned a foreign language, I would definitely say keep up on your language, whether it's reading your scriptures in your foreign language or, you know, meeting up with people that know that same language. I have been able to keep up on my Spanish because, well, a couple of my brothers speak Spanish, so I talk with them sometimes. And then I work in a restaurant, and most of the people in the kitchen and in the back, they're all Mexicans, and so I talk with all of them in Spanish. And I've actually been able to use it fairly often in my life, and so I'm always really, really glad that I remember the Spanish, because I know a lot of missionaries that stop studying it and they've just lost it, and so it's really hard for them to talk to members that they taught, you know, down there, and they can't talk to people and teach like they used to, and so they really regret not keeping up on that foreign language. So that's another big one, I think. And then just continue being excited about the work and never stop trying to share your testimony or, you know, share the gospel with other people, even though it can be really hard, especially being in Utah. Like, it's really a struggle for me up here, but I do as much as I can, and I use like social media, and I just do the best I can to be a part of the missionary efforts, even if it's just with like family history. That's still very important, you know. So just keep up on the excitement of the mission, and then just don't be lazy. Just remember all of the amazing things you learned on your mission, especially like the schedule and the discipline. Remember that, and don't just like ignore it, and just be glad that you can finally relax and sleep in. Like, keep going with it, and it'll really help you later in life. So I actually got robbed one time. And it was not our fault because we weren't doing the robbing, but it was kind of our fault. So one day we had been teaching a lesson and it was going great. And so the rule is in the mission is you have to be home at 9 o'clock, but if you're teaching a lesson, you can be home at 9:30, right? So we were teaching and we kind of lost track of time. So we ended up leaving their house around 9:30 and I was freaking out because I was like, we're late, we need to get back to the apartment. And we were like probably 10 blocks away. So we were just walking super fast and trying to get home. And so we were doing the best we could to be obedient, which is great, but we should have been home at 9:30. And so we were just walking home as fast as we could. And as we were walking home, one of our neighbors, we had contacted a couple days before, and they said they wanted to listen to our message again. And so we had gone back probably 10 times, and we could never find this person. Probably wasn't actually interested, but we tried. And so when we were walking back, we saw that his light was on, and we were like, oh my gosh, he's home. Oh my gosh, do we knock? And so we seriously sat in the street for probably like 3 minutes trying to decide if it was more important to go home and be on time or if we should knock on his door. And we both felt the spirit and felt like we needed to knock on the door. But then in my obedient mind, I was like, no, it's more important that we're obedient. We'll be blessed for our obedience. Let's just ignore the spirit a little bit and get home. And we're like, okay, we'll go home and we'll knock on his door first thing tomorrow morning. And while we were discussing this person walked past us in the street, and my companion got a really weird feeling about it, but she kind of ignored it because we were discussing what to do with this investigator. And so when we decided to just keep going home, we only lived like 2 houses down. We kept walking, and then the person that was walking past us turned around and walked toward us, and we both just had like a sinking feeling in our stomach. We're like, oh no, something's gonna happen. And so he walked to my companion first, and it was really dark out, and so he kind of pulled something out of his pocket and held it in my companion's face and was like, give me your cell phone. And my companion, she's a very tough girl and doesn't get scared easily. And so she actually pushed his hand away. We thought it was a knife, but it turns out it was just like a keychain flashlight or something, but he wanted us to think it was a knife. And so she wasn't scared at all, but I had no idea what was going on. And I was slowly backing away, trying to get away from the situation because I had the cell phone and he wanted it, and it was freaking me out. And so I wasn't going to ditch my companion because that's completely against the rules, but I was trying to distance myself a little bit from him. And so he kept asking her for the cell phone, and she's like, I don't have a cell phone. And then eventually, she was so sarcastic. She's like, I don't have the cell phone, but I have a Tic Tac. Would you like a Tic Tac? And I was sitting there you did not just offer a robber a Tic Tac. Are you kidding me right now? And I was just freaking out. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the cell phone in my pocket, and I was freaking out. And so I was still just backing away slowly. And I honestly could have taken off and run, but I wasn't gonna just leave my companion, even though she kind of expected me to. But I wasn't gonna do that to her, so I just kept walking away. And then he looked at me, and my heart dropped. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he knows I have the cell phone. So he ran over to me and was like, give me the cell phone. And I was about to say no and just kind of lie a little bit and be like, no, I don't have one either. But then, so we read the mission manual every morning, right? And so the line from the mission manual that says, do not resist robbers or people that come up to you, that entire line from the mission manual just flashed in my mind, and I was like, all right, fine. So I pulled the cell phone out of my pocket, I lit it up so he could see that it was a cell phone. He took it and he ran. And I was like, oh, so he didn't even want to rob anything else. It was just the cell phone. Because at that time, I had my camera on me. I had money on me. I had so many valuables on me at the time, which I don't know why I had that much on me because I never did. And so I was so surprised that he just wanted the cell phone, and he ran off. And then as he was running away, my companion was like, is there anything else we can help you with? And I was like, shut up, hermano, we don't want him to come back. I was freaking out. And so I was shaking the entire time. And so we are so close to home, but we didn't have a cell phone, and our district leader was gonna call us any minute, and we're like, well, we don't have a phone on us. And so we're like, well, we don't want him freaking out that we're not answering the phone. So we decided to walk to the elder's apartment, and it was probably 15 or 20 blocks away. And so we're walking to their apartment, and it's so late by this point. It's almost 10 o'clock, and we're like, this has been an awful night. But as we were walking, we were just talking about it, and we ended up just laughing about it because we never felt like we were in danger because, we had the spirit with us and everything. We didn't feel like we were in danger. And we just laughed because we're like, he's the worst robber ever. A, he didn't even have a knife, nothing dangerous that he could have hurt us with. And B, he just took the cell phone and ran for it. Like, he didn't even ask us for anything else. We're like, it must have been his first time robbing someone because it was awful. And we just ended up laughing about it. And so we're just sitting there eating Tic Tacs, waiting for the elders to get home because they were also late because they were teaching a lesson. So eventually they get home and they're like, hermanos, what are you doing here? So we had to explain the entire situation, and we called the zone leaders, and the zone leaders told the elders to give us their cell phone because it's more important for the sisters to have a phone than the elders. And so they were all mad at us because they had a nice cell phone and then we got it, and they were all jealous and stuff. But so it was really interesting because I was nervous during it, but then afterwards I was like, I knew I wasn't in danger. Nothing was going to happen to us. And so it was so amazing to feel the Spirit even in a crazy situation like that. And it turned out to just be a hilarious story for us to tell because he was just such a funny robber. There was one in particular. So in my area, Tandil, that was where we baptized the couple. We didn't have a ton of investigators, and so we were just tracting one day, and it was a really hot day. And we had been walking across this courtyard, and we were only like a block or two away from the church, and you can't drink the water there. And so our water bottles were empty, and so we were gonna go try to fill up the water because they had a big water thing in the church. But my companion, as we were walking, we saw this couple sitting on the wall, and she just like felt like she needed to go ask them for some water instead. And I was like, okay. I was always nervous asking people for water because I never knew if it was going to come from purified or just the tap. And so I was always a little nervous about it, but we tried to do it as much as we could just to have a way to talk to people, you know? And so she felt like she needed to go ask them. I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's go ask. So we asked this couple for some water, and they were so, happy to help us, and they came back with some juice for us. And so the secret is when you ask people for water, you have to drink it really slow because then they have to sit out there and talk with you, and so it gave you a way better chance to talk to them about stuff, right? So we were just like slowly drinking our juice, and we got to know this couple, and they invited us to come back and teach them, and we were so excited. And the whole experience of teaching them was just so amazing. We went back for the first official lesson where we could sit down and talk to them, and the husband and wife were just sitting there. And then at the end of the lesson, the wife told us that she had lived in a different city before, had taken all the lessons. She was about to get baptized, but then her roommate, who was a member, was how she actually got to know the church. She moved, and so she just never saw the missionaries again, really. I don't know how they lost contact with her, but she just lost contact with the church. And so she had always wondered what would have happened if she would have gotten baptized and everything. And she still had her Book of Mormon, and she read it occasionally. Was such an amazing person, even not being a member of the church. And then when we were teaching her, she was like, ever since I moved to this city, because she moved to the city to marry her husband, so they were married, and we were like, you're actually married with a marriage certificate and everything. And they were, and we're like, that's a miracle in and of itself because they were already married. And she was just so excited that we went up to her and asked her for some water because she was like, I pass by that church every day, and she's like, I always want to go inside and meet with the missionaries. And she's like, but I've always been too scared, and I just didn't, have the confidence to walk in by myself and go meet with some people. And so she's like, I've been wanting to do it for months, but I never could. And then she's like, and then you knocked on our door and, talked to us and asked us for some water. And she's like, I knew that was a sign that I needed to do it. And so that was just a miracle for us that she'd been craving the church again. She wanted to go take the lessons again. And then we were able to find her, and my companion felt like we needed to ask that person. And so that was a miracle in and of itself. And so the entire time we were teaching, and they were so excited. And she kept all of her commitments. She was really excited to be baptized. Her husband was a little bit harder. He was a little bit more weary about the church and wasn't as excited to get baptized, but he kept his commitments and did everything like that. And the lesson we had with him when he finally told us that he had prayed and gotten a testimony, that was probably the most spiritual experience I've ever had, just because he finally did it. He knelt down and prayed, and he felt the Spirit, and he wanted to be baptized. From then on, he was all for it, So that entire experience was super spiritual. But right before their baptism, we were teaching them one of the last lessons, and we were finalizing all of the baptism, details and everything, who they wanted to be baptized by, and all the prayers and everything. And he was like, so I need to tell you guys something that I've never told you before. And we're like, oh no, is this going to prevent him from being baptized? And we got a little bit nervous. But he was like, a couple weeks before you guys knocked on our door, I had a dream, and we were like in heaven or something, and he was like, I was walking and I was just lost, and then I saw you two, and you guys were just able to help me find my way. And he was explaining this dream, and then he was like, and after we had been talking and you helped me, I saw a person, like descending from heaven, and he described the exact portrait of Jesus Christ coming down like with his hands out, over the desert, and he described that exact thing, and we showed him a picture. He's like, that's what it was in his dream. And he was like, I had a dream about you girls and about Jesus Christ. And so that was before we'd even met him. And so then afterwards, when he told us that, the Spirit was so strong. Like, I don't even know how the Spirit could have been that strong in a room before. But he was just like, I know that this is the truth, because not only, do I have a testimony of it, but I dreamt about you before I even met you. And like, I knew that you two were going to be my angels. And they constantly called us their angels. And they were just so grateful for us. And they were so grateful for the truth that we were able to bring to them and how much happiness we could give to them. And it was like my miracle story of the mission, of my baptisms, because they were so prepared, and all they were waiting for was the missionaries to come knock on their door, And so that's when I really had a testimony of the elect, and how some people are just prepared to learn about the gospel and some people just aren't ready yet. And this couple had been prepared, from all of their previous experiences with the church. And, and another thing he had told us was when he was a little boy, he had been riding the bus, and his family had been kind of struggling a little bit when he was younger. And so he saw when he was on the bus, his mom walked in front of the church, like she had already been planning to go there, and a member of the church had given her a huge grocery bag of food. And he was like, I had no idea that she had even had contact with the church or anything. And he's like, I don't know how they figured out we needed food, but he always remembered the kindness that the members showed his family and how they were always willing to help him and, give him the food if they needed it. And so because of that experience when he was a little boy, he was so open to receive our message, as an adult. And so it just was so amazing to see how all of their experiences led up to them finding the church and being baptized. And it was the most amazing baptism I had ever been a part of, because the members were so involved in their conversion, and we had almost every single lesson we had a member present. And so they really connected with this one family. And so that was, the dad was the person who was able to baptize them, and they just were so grateful for all the members, and they just found so many friends in the members. And actually during their baptism, the husband was kind of tall, and the guy that was baptizing him didn't scoot forward enough. And so when he baptized him, he completely hit his head on the wall of the baptismal font, really hard. And so the guy kind of fell into the water. And so it wasn't a valid baptism. We had to baptize him again, but we were like, are you okay? We didn't know if he had a concussion or anything. And as soon as we baptized him again and it was okay, he walked out and he was rubbing his head. He's like, wow, I didn't think the Spirit was gonna hit me that hard. And it was just so funny that even though he just got knocked out by being baptized, he was still so positive about it and so excited about his baptism. And after they were baptized, before the end of the service, they bore their testimonies, and it was just such a spiritual meeting, and everybody in the audience was crying. Even their friend who they invited to come watch their baptism, he was even crying, and it was just such an incredible experience, and the Spirit was so strong through the entire process, and we were just on cloud nine every day after we met with them. It was just so amazing. I think that was probably one of the most spiritual things I felt on my mission. So, clothes advice for the sisters, I have a good amount of, because I pretty much got all of the clothes you should not get for the mission, so take my advice. Your best friend is elastic. Elastic skirts are the best thing you could possibly get for your mission. When I was shopping for my mission, I went to all of these nice stores like Kohl's and Burlington and everything, and I tried to get nice pencil skirts and everything. Do not do that. Go to DI or to any random thrift shop and buy the ugliest, most comfortable skirts you can possibly find, because you're not going to care about how ugly it is in the mission. I dressed really ugly and people know it, but I didn't care because, I tried to be comfortable. And I was really grateful for the elastic skirts, because it is almost guaranteed you're going to gain weight on your mission. I gained a lot of weight on my mission, And I was so grateful for the elastic skirts because I was still able to breathe, whereas other sisters, they were like struggling to pull up the zippers and everything. Like elastic, best friend by far. And then another thing is just get simple shirts that are comfortable, just like t-shirts that are plain colors and like colors that'll match all your skirts and everything, but just comfortable t-shirts. You need a couple nice, outfits for conferences and everything, but for the most part, when you're on the streets, you just want to be the most comfortable you can be so you can focus on the message. So my favorite shirts were just normal t-shirts, like v-necks or scoop necks, whatever, just solid colors, and then you can put colored cardigans with them. And I love that because layers is really, really good for down there because it's super humid. And so in the winter, it's really, really, really cold. And in the summer, it's really, really hot. And so you kind of get both extremes. And so you want to do a lot of layers. And so I would say like cardigans and scarves. Definitely take scarves because I only took 2. And so I had to buy a bunch down there and it took away from a lot of money that I had. And so scarves, cardigans, really comfy skirts. And then for your shoes, my favorite pair of shoes were my Echo shoes. I just got a pair of normal black Mary Jane Echo shoes, and they were my favorites. They lasted me my entire mission, and I liked them more than my other pair of shoes. I got like these weird clogs that I hated. They were so uncomfortable, and I got blisters from them every time I wore them, and everyone made fun of me because they were so ugly. So I would say just Echoes are really expensive, but it is so worth it because you're not going to be happy if your feet hurt. And so you're going to be walking so much every day, so get the most comfortable pair of shoes you can possibly get that are going to last forever, because if you need to buy shoes down there, they will not last long, they won't be comfortable, and so you're just going to be miserable. So just get a couple pair of really, really good comfortable shoes. And then one thing I didn't take was one nice pair of flats for conferences, and I regretted that because I didn't want to take my ugly shoes to conferences because you're supposed to look nice when you're in the presence of president, right? And so I was always really embarrassed when I had my ugly shoes, and so I ended up buying a pair of shoes down there, and they were the crappiest pair of shoes I've ever bought in my life, but they were nicer, and so I only wore them for conferences. And so I would definitely say, 2 pairs of really good, comfortable shoes that'll last for forever, and then just one nicer pair of flats that you can wear for conferences, and so you can feel pretty, because the only days I cared about what I looked like was on conference days when I was going to be taking a ton of pictures and seeing all of my old friends and everything. So that's what I would recommend for shoes. And then, everyone has different hairstyles or whatever. Just know your hair and just remember it's going to be humid, so do the best you can with your hair. I would definitely say not to dye it before you go because that's just going to be a hassle, and it's really expensive to do that kind of stuff down there. I only got one haircut while I was down there, but I talked to everybody and they said it was going to be like 50 pesos to get a haircut, but then I found a pair of scissors that was 50 pesos, and so one of the sisters in my apartment actually knew how to cut hair, and so I just bought the scissors and had her cut it for me. But so you got to keep that in mind, like all of the upkeep and everything. But really, for clothes, just make sure it's simple and comfortable because you are representing Christ. You do need to look nice, but you have to be comfortable as well. So just do some nice elastic skirts and just make sure they're long enough so you can, have breeze and everything when it's hot. And definitely take down tights and leggings because in the winter, they're your best friend. And get the thicker kind, not the super thin ones. That are going to actually keep you warm in the winter. But I forgot to take a pair of pantyhose that were my skin color, and so I needed them for a conference, and the only kind I could find down there were white, and I'm pretty light skinned, but they were even whiter than me, and so it just completely didn't match, and I was so embarrassed to wear these, and I never wore them again. So just make sure you have a lot of good, stockings and tights and everything that are going to keep you warm in the winter. And then your jacket, it just says in the book that they send you just to get a really good waterproof layered jacket. And I had a companion that got the right kind, and I was so jealous of her the entire time because if it was cold but not rainy, she would just take the inner layer so it wasn't as bulky, but she was still really warm. And then when it rained, she would just throw on the waterproof outer layer. And then it was perfect for her. And what I was really envious of was that when it was rainy in the summer, when it was really hot, it would rain for 10, 20 minutes, and then the sun would be shining for 2 hours, and then it would rain again. And so you're just hot and humid and sticky and disgusting, and you just feel gross. And so it's really nice to have that kind of a jacket, because it's not a warm jacket, it's just waterproof. So you could have the waterproof jacket on when it rains and then take it off when it's not, and then you're not all sticky and gross like I was the whole time. So I was really envious of her. So just make sure it's really versatile and you can use it for different, instances. And then waterproof boots are super important, because when it rains there, it rains and the streets flood, and it's like a muddy, gross lake through all the streets, because all the streets are like dirt anyways. And so my boots I actually found on sale. They were Echo boots and they were waterproof and they were perfect. But I had a bunch of companions that just wore like rain boots that were just nicer and just like not patterned, just black rain boots, and that worked out really well for them too. But just make sure that they're waterproof and that they're warm, because in the winter your feet are going to get so cold. So just make sure that your feet are warm, because then if your feet are uncomfortable, you're going to be uncomfortable the whole day. And one day I didn't wear the right kind of socks and I was freezing the entire day and I was shivering the entire day, and it was just a miserable day. And then just beanies to keep your head warm. Just make sure you have everything for cold winters and really hot summers, and then you should be good to go.
Well, the Bahia Blanca Mission is kind of the final frontier for Argentina as far as like the north goes to the south. Argentina is a really big country. If you stretch it out, I mean, top to bottom, it's probably the difference between New York and Los Angeles, like the whole length of our country. It's definitely not as wide or as big, and there's only about 48 million people to our 325 in the United States. But the Bahia Blanca Mission itself is probably about the size of Texas. It's fairly big. Most of that, or a good portion of that, is in a province called La Pampa, which is you can't say uninhabited, because there are people there and farms and all kinds of things going on, but the church hasn't reached the farthest western end of the mission. There are, I think, branches, but they even belong to bigger districts that are in the Mendoza Mission or the Neuquén Mission. There's a little called Catriel on the very border, but it's on the border of the Pampa and a province called Rio Negro, but the saints gather there on the Rio Negro side so that they can be closer to a mission president in Neuquén rather than very far away in Bahia Blanca. There are actually some stakes. There are two in Bahia Blanca. There's one in La Pampa and Santa Rosa. They are making one in between two cities called Olavarria and Tandil that are in the center of the province of Buenos Aires. I should mention there are three provinces in the mission, pieces of three provinces in all of the Pampa. So there's pieces of Provincia de Buenos Aires, probably most of the province. It belongs to the Bahia Blanca Mission. And then a tiny bit of Rio Negro in a place called Viedma. But there are two stakes in Bahia Blanca. There's one in La Pampa, like I said. There's one in the middle of Buenos Aires that has two big cities called Olavarria and Tandil. And then over on the eastern coast, probably the most famous, iconic part of the mission as far as the world is concerned, is a city called Mar del Plata, which is kind of the vacation spot of Argentina as far as beaches go. It's a city of a little more than 1 million people, and it has two stakes. It was pushing for 3, and they're kind of in between doing it. It's got a lot of interesting challenges. I served there for about 6 months, but yeah. So I mean, if the mission ever does divide, it'll probably divide between Bahia Blanca and Mar del Plata. Of course, there would need to be a few more stakes for that to happen. They talked a lot about what would need to. As soon as I got there, my first mission president would talk to us about what would need to happen for there to be a temple, and he would project it into into 10 years. And he said, but if we have an attitude of we can have a temple in 5 years, then we can have one in 10 years. If we have an attitude of we're going to have a temple in 15 years, then it'll be a few decades before we ever have a temple. And that vision is very important to have in Argentina. The church is fairly new. I mean, there's only 2 temples in the country. But there are 4 million potential candidates for exaltation in the Bahia Blanca Mission, and enough of those working towards that with their covenants and everything, if they were to be baptized and the men were to be righteous priesthood holders and full tithe payers, then they would be considered for a temple. Especially, I mean, Bahia Blanca, like I said, its geographic position is advantageous for having a temple for the southernmost inhabitants of Argentina, and also for ones that live right around there. There are quite a few. There would just, need to be enough if you're going to build a temple, and you have to be ready for it. But that's kind of how the work is going right now. My first mission president actually finished his mission a year into my mission, and the mission president that I had for the second half of my mission, Manuel Parreño, is still there. He's from Spain, and he and his wife end, I think, a year from now, or maybe a little bit less. I believe it's in June is when they got there, 3 years ago. So I've been back for a while now, but yeah.
What was craziest food you had in Argentina?
Craziest food that's an animal. It was called peludo. It was like an armadillo. It was a big hairy armadillo. But they served it cold in what's called an escabeche in like vinegar and stuff. Craziest part of the cow was called tripa gorda, and it's anus. It wasn't too terrible. When they told me what it was, I decided not to tell my companion what it was until later. But yeah, a little fatty.
What was one of the most crazy or dangerous experiences you had?
Probably the second time I got robbed. I was on a colectivo, a bus, and a gentleman asked me for a coin. I told him I didn't have any coins, but I gave him one of those little pass-along cards that has Jesus on it. And he said, "Oh, thank you." And then he leaned over and said, "Hey, I'm not joking. Like, give me your money or I'm going to kill you." And I said, "I don't know." Like, I just kind of turned around, pretended like I didn't hear it, and he started whispering to me a bunch of profanities. And then told me that he was going to get off the bus and shoot me. And I, probably shouldn't have done this, but I reasoned with him and said, if you were asking me for a coin because you don't have money, like, how do you have money for a gun and bullets? And made him really mad. It was a holiday, so nobody else was on the bus, and he was just screaming at me. And then my companion turned around because he wanted to see what was going on. And I just told him in English, like, just turn back around. Don't look at this guy. And he asked for my belt, my shoes, and a lot of other things. But yeah, I mean I never really there's danger, but you just got to be attentive.
What's one of the most important spiritual lessons or life lessons you learned on your mission?
I learned more so than that the gospel speaks every language. I found out that it really speaks to every kind of person in all kinds of different walks of life, that it really is for everyone. And if it seems like people are kind of uniform in the church, it's just because the blessings are uniform for everyone. Everybody gets the blessings, temporal blessings and spiritual blessings from being a member of the church. And maybe second or third generation don't really know that those blessings come to them just because of a tradition of serving God and of being the best person you can be. But even people who are in really humble circumstances, you can have the vision for them and their children to have all the blessings, maybe not all the temporal blessings that you and your family have, but almost everything and definitely everything they need for not just a good life, but an amazing life.
Awesome. What's one of the greatest skills you gained?
Besides really mastering Spanish and loving Spanish, I think being able to relate to people, not just talk to them, but talk with them and converse and really get to know someone and communicate on a level that's a lot higher than talking about the weather or sports or trying to find common ground, but really communicating my own hopes, desires, fears, a lot of other things, emotions, things that you maybe wouldn't talk about, and listening to theirs and understanding them, which has helped me in my relationships with my family and with friends and romantic relationships as I come back from the mission.
What was one of the most spiritual experiences you had?
So about 6 months into my mission, I baptized almost every week in Salt Lake, and they've just made it kind of a point in a place like that you baptize every week. And obviously, it's not about the numbers, but in a place where you can baptize a ton, you kind of do it for the numbers as well, because you should. I mean, if you can harvest that much, then you should kind of glorify God. As far as Argentina goes, though, the church was a little bit newer and it's different in Latin America. I hadn't baptized anybody up to the 6 month part of my mission. And I remember just an awful day where we almost had nobody to teach. And at the very end of the day, we went and you clap in Argentina to get people to come to the door, and the house looked almost abandoned. And a lady came out who's obviously an immigrant. She was from Bolivia. It didn't talk like an Argentine or look like one. And we talked to her, and I just very almost desperately said, "Hey, we have a message about Jesus Christ. Please let us in so we can talk to you about it because it will change your life." And she told us yes. She went to church a little while after that lesson and really enjoyed it. And I got transferred. And as I was getting transferred, she told me that she had actually just left Bolivia. Her husband had been murdered by some drug cartel kind of people. He'd been involved in some shady business, and so she escaped with her family to Argentina to find the only other family she had, I think, was her mother. And she told me that it really made the difference in her life. And I might not be able to even fill up a page with the amount of people that I helped get baptized, but I know all their names and all their stories. And I know Sandra very well because my companion and I were willing to, first of all, knock on or clap at a house that looked like it was abandoned, and also teach this woman in her patio because there were no men inside. We couldn't go inside, and also kind of go out our way to help her to get to church. And it made the difference for her and her family, realizing that maybe if I had been a little bit less faithful, another missionary would have been given that opportunity. But kind of God's plan definitely does exist and is known to the faithful missionary, to someone who will really try to be a part of it.
Cool. What was craziest weather you experienced?
So when I lived in La Pampa, I lived there for almost a year. My mission just on and off, 6 months in a city called General Pico and 6 months in a city called Santa Rosa. It would get in this weird pattern for the weeks in the summer where it would be really just blazing hot at the beginning of the week, and it'd get really humid in the middle of the week, and then by like Saturday, Sunday, it would just start pouring rain, and that was really frustrating in some parts because almost every Sunday it rained, and Argentines are of the urban legend that rain will make them melt or give them cancer or something like that, and they won't go out in the rain. So even some longtime members would miss church because it was raining. But that definitely, just the fact that it would happen, it seemed, every Saturday and Sunday. I think sometimes I would pray and say, I know this might not be like the most righteous desire and won't help people progress, but can it please not rain on Saturday and Sunday? So we can get people to baptisms or to church this weekend, and it was just something you had to learn to deal with.
Let's see. What's the best piece of mission trip advice you could give?
If I guess it's kind of what I said a little bit earlier. Find out why you have a desire to serve, and understand your calling comes from you having a desire to serve. You can have a calling and go on a mission, and if you still don't really want to be there, you won't discover a lot of your purpose as a missionary until you're willing to do that. And that's especially important for elders, like I said, because it's an obligation for us, because God needs priesthood holders and he needs heads of household and he needs all of the men in his church that are willing to obey any measure of the commandments to do this. But at the same time, you have to have that internal desire and do it for some kind of something inside you. Of course, the Spirit will help you find that, and Revelation's good for that. But yeah.
What's the thing you admire most about the people?
They're funny. They're very funny. And they've been through a lot of difficulties in the last 50 years as far as their government goes. Been in like kind of a police state or anything like that, but they're always finding things to laugh about. And it's kind of some people get really upset about it, that they're always making fun of this and that, but the fact that they can laugh at themselves and laugh at everything around them doesn't mean that they don't think anything's sacred. It definitely just means that they have found a really great way to deal with having a difficult existence and difficult survival as families, and it's definitely something that keeps them together and endears me to them, definitely.
Funniest language mistake.
So there's a word for bird, pájaro, that a lot of new missionaries get confused with. And I remember one time I was on exchanges with a very new missionary. He told me there were pajeros in the trees. And pajero is it really means someone who works with hay, but is a very vulgar representation of something else. So I tried to correct him, and he told me, no, I'm pretty sure it's pajero. And I told him, well, why don't you ask a member? He did, and it was fairly embarrassed when they laughed and told him not to say that. Also, the word for grab in a lot of Latin America is coger, but that's a really vulgar word in Argentina. It's taboo. You wouldn't hear it. I wouldn't hear it on TV even. If Argentine TV had, the censorship that America has, you would probably hear it on their TV. But
hardest experience you had, or one of the hardest?
I lived in a house with 3 missionaries, one that was a very good friend of mine and 2 others that were not so much good friends of mine, and it just seemed like there was always conflict in the house, and one of the hardest experiences I ever had was just praying to love one missionary in particular who really had it out for me. I don't know what it was, if it was jealousy or probably a lot of things that I was doing or other things, and I just had to pray for Heavenly Father to make me love him, even if he drove me that insane, and did that. And it was a really humbling experience, because it didn't just take one prayer one day. It took a really long time, and believing that I could if I exercised enough faith and patience. And
then last question would be just, if you had best piece of advice you could give for someone just coming home from the mission, for a return missionary?
Just coming home from their mission? Maintain... there's a certain amount that you want to keep for your mission. There's a certain amount that you have to change because you're back in the world. The things that you definitely don't want to lose are your excitedness about the scriptures. You have a lot of other things you could be doing, and your love for serving. Definitely try to serve in any moment you can in the church, regardless of how annoying that is for people. In a place where there's a lot of return missionaries who probably want to do the same thing, because you should always have a desire to serve after, whether it's just missionary work or your home teaching or calling in church or do anything, do it with the same kind of zeal you did on your mission. The mission will change your life. It's like 2 years it's like an entire lifetime in 2 years, in a short 2-year period. My mission meant everything to me, as far as preparation goes. I mean, I've been preparing since I was 8 years old. I realized out there that I was really born to do it. And I think all the young men in our church, regardless of their level of preparation when they get their call, were born to serve missions. It's not coincidence or just chance that they're in a position to serve, and that they can make that decision. It really is providence. I know that as much as the mission changed my life, it only changed my life because I was worried about everybody else's life changing, either my companions or my the missionaries that I served as a leader, and any members that I talked to, but also all the people that especially all the people that I taught the gospel, that I tried to help understand the truth and happiness. There's a lot of things in this world that can give you pleasure, but very few that can give you a lasting happiness. And the mission is one of them. I know that that God loves us, and that His love is something that stretches through time and space to really reach all of His children. An important element of that is that a lot of times it's shared through His other children to His children, and becoming kind of that conduit for God's love, and for really loving everybody around me, being filled with charity is definitely the biggest challenge, and my biggest challenge as I come back. Always doing that, but also the most rewarding and the most timeless thing. I really do know that Christ lives because of those evidences of His love all over the place and in all of His servants. I love all of His missionaries. I love the opportunity to be one, and I love all of His missionaries. And I do bear testimony that this is His church. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
It was interesting trying to go into homes of people in Argentina, just because the culture is so different. A lot of them don't even have screen doors, and so they just like tear rags and hang it for their door as their door, just so that the flies don't come in. So that's interesting. You just walk and you can kind of see into everyone's home, and then when you go in, you just kind of walk through the torn rags. The houses are all very small. They're not they don't have a lot of money down there, so the houses are always very small. And usually there's just one room, kind of a central room that's not like the kitchen or a bedroom, where the table will be where they will eat their meals, but also watch TV or talk. So there's no couches. I remember thinking it's so strange that no one has couches and no one has carpet. Just, cement floors and a table in a small little room. But another thing that was interesting was they always have the TV on. So that was one of the original struggles of going in and teaching, trying to ask people to turn off their TVs, and they never turn it off. And that's just a very odd thing, because usually they'll have conversations with friends, and the TV will just be noise in the background. So I remember when I was first there on the mission and didn't have the courage yet to just always say, or figure out how to say politely, "Can you turn off your TV?" I remember once I was teaching a lady and she kept looking at the TV screen, and it was annoying me so much because I felt like I was giving her this powerful sermon and she wasn't even really listening. So I went and stood right in front of the TV and so that she couldn't watch it. But it was just really interesting, all the nuances of the culture, and a lot of them were not conducive to teaching, just because they like to have the TV on, that as soon as you get there, they want to get up and start serving you mate or cookies or drinks or whatever, and you'll be talking, and then all of a sudden they just get up and leave to go prepare something, and you're just like, "Come back, I don't care." So it was just interesting trying to figure out how to teach these people how to like set it up as you're taught in the lesson to like turn off all the TVs and sit down and pray. And it's a very formal thing, and they're a very informal culture. So to do a lot of those formal things that which to us is normal was just kind of awkward and uncomfortable for them. So it was interesting at the beginning trying to figure out how to not force them to go by certain things, but also trying to create an environment where they could feel the Spirit and learn. Another really difficult thing for me in the beginning was they don't have the same concept of time that we do. Here we're very much structured, and we make appointments, and we try to be on time. And the White Handbook says be there 5 minutes. You're representatives of Jesus Christ, and no one wanted to make appointments ever. If we made an appointment, it's because I forced them to pick a time, or I said, okay, well, we'll be here at this time, so that I could feel good about making an appointment. But I learned that, any appointment I set up never worked. And they just weren't ever home when we made an appointment. And if I said, okay, we'll be there at this time, they'd be like, well, if I'm here, I'm here. If I'm not, I'm not. So it's just like, okay. So after about a month of trying to get to everywhere when we said we'd be there, and trying to have a very structured plan, we started learning, me and my companion, that you have to work with them differently. You have to understand their culture. And so I think it's important, because no matter which part of the country or the world you go to, there's going to be different cultural things that tie into how you can do the work, because you have to be able to accustom or tailor the missionary work to fit their needs and their customs. And so it became more of kind of learning and remembering when they're home and when's a good time to stop by. And most of the time just showing up when we felt impressed, or when we were working in the area and we thought, oh, they should be home now, and just kind of showing up. And when we just showed up and they were home, they would, be glad for us to come in. But it was just the appointment setting that they didn't like and never worked. And I remember at first getting really frustrated, because we'd plan every night and make backup plans and backup plans, the backup plans, and then they're never working. And then just feeling like I'm just walking for 9 hours a day or doing nothing. And but when I let go of trying to follow my schedule so exactly, and I would make a plan, or like a general idea of who I would want to see, maybe the things that we need to teach, or the people that are on our minds that we need to help, and then kind of have a general direction of where I wanted to go through the day, but being willing and open to new possibilities and opportunities. So like if an opportunity opened up, but we had planned to go here, but as this opportunity opened up, I learned to take those opportunities and be flexible. And I think that's when my work started changing a lot, just because I allowed the Spirit to guide me more of who to talk to, who to help. And a lot of times I would find, like, if I was stressed because we had an appointment, but we found a wonderful teaching opportunity, or a new investigator, or met an old investigator that we've been trying to find for a while. But usually the people that we'd been trying to go weren't even home, and we'd go later and they were there, and it just worked out. And so it was learning to trust more on it being the Lord's work, and just allowing, I guess, giving up control, which, just seemed backward to what I've been taught in the MTC. But I think there were good lessons for me to learn. And I think all missionaries realize at some point in their mission that the mission where they go is perfect for them. And I think it's because the Lord wanted me to learn certain things that I had to develop in order to work with the Argentine people. To those who are preparing to go on a mission, I just want to say that it's the best decision probably that you have ever made. There might be some doubts, but because there was with me. But I just wanted to attest to the fact that I know that God knows us, and He has prepared something so wonderful and special and unique to you, that this time that you have dedicated to the Lord is your time to basically walk side by side your Savior and to learn of Him and to learn your relationship with Him and what the gospel is all about, and to feel the love that He has for each one of His children, no matter the circumstances or the life that they have had. And for me, my mission is one of the most sacred times in my life, and it's the time that I got to know my Savior more than I had ever known Him before, and the time where my relationship with Him grew, my testimony grew, my knowledge of the scriptures grew, my understanding of the gospel and the church grew, and I was changed because of my mission. The parts of my nature were changed, my understanding of things were changed, and the experiences I had were unique to me and the things that Heavenly Father wanted to teach me. I know that this gospel is true. I know that the Savior lives. There were times where I just felt Him so near and just so a part of what we were doing that there's no way that it can't be true. You'll see so many and witness so many miracles, and I know that this is His work. It's the best work that you could be doing here on earth. I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet and that he restored this church, and I know that we, in our small way, are contributing to the building up of the kingdom of God here on the earth. And I know your mission will be just as important to you and be the foundation for the rest of your life in your spiritual development. And I say these things in Jesus Christ, amen.